Hi, my name is Joe Massaro. I'm the owner of Right Over Water on Petra Island in Mahopac, New York. This is coming to you from U.S. Modernist Radio.
Mama don't allow no architecture around here. Mama don't allow no architecture around here. Oh, I don't care what Mama don't allow, gonna draw mine modern anyhow. Mama don't allow no architecture around here.
Welcome to U.S. Modernist Radio, where we talk and laugh with the people who enjoy, own, create, dream about, preserve, love, and hate modernist architecture, the most exciting and controversial buildings in the world. I'm Tom Guild. Today, we start in Los Angeles for a talk with Rudolph Schindler, homeowner, and the star of 2.5 Men, Holland Taylor. Then we move to Palm Springs, the center of the universe for mid-century modernism, not just with the buildings, but the culture that brings together design and fun and vivid personality. Everybody who's a fan of modernism needs to plan a trip, and today we'll talk with 2 Palm Springs tour guides, Shann Carr and J.D. Cargill. We've also got author Adele Cygelman, whose new documentary is called Arthur Elrod, Modern Cool. And later we'll enjoy another track from jazz pianist Lenore Raphael. And now, your host, Mr. Modernism, George Smart.
Thanks, Tom. We've got a very special Moon Over Modernism weekend coming in Miami, February 28th and March the 1st. Experience one of Miami's most extraordinary mid-century modern treasures, the Jetsons House. This 1949 modernist icon was designed by architect Rufus Nims, one of the architects who defined the naturally cooled Florida tropical house following World War II. He was also the creator of the iconic Orange Howard Johnson's restaurants and hotels. Even before it was finished in 1949, the house was the talk of Miami. In the early 60s, when the TV cartoon The Jetsons came on, the home was nicknamed the Jetsons House from neighbors who marveled at its futuristic form and floating appearance. After sitting vacant, the house found new life through the passionate vision of architect-owner Gabriela Liebert and her team, who completed a thoughtful restoration and addition that honors the original while adapting it for contemporary life. Renamed the Skyfin House, its world debut is February, and you know you want to come. See the amazing photos and get your tickets now at usmodernist.org/Skyfin. That's SKYFIN. U.S. Modernist Radio is underwritten by the Brent R. Harris Charitable Trust, restorer of Richard Neutra's Kaufman Desert House in Palm Springs, and 6 other houses in California. And by Diane Bald and the Budman family, restoring significant architecture in Toronto, Los Angeles, Malibu, and Palm Springs.
Holland Taylor is one of Hollywood's most talented and recognized actors, and almost everyone has seen her as the Malibu real estate agent mom to Charlie Sheen in 2.5 Men, the long-running Chuck Lorre series on TV. With a career spanning 7 decades, Taylor's first TV appearance was as Mrs. Arnold in J.T., and her first film appearance was in 1976 in The Next Man. Recently, she was also part of The Morning Show on Apple TV. But for us modernist fans, she is a treasured Rudolph Schindler house owner in Los Angeles. Here's George's conversation with Holland Taylor.
Holland, I can't believe it's been 22 years since 2.5 Men premiered. I mean, that show...
Oh, my God. I wish you hadn't said that. Really?
Yeah. 2003, I believe, was when it came on the air. And that show had such stellar writing. And the ensemble that you guys had together was amazing.
It was a great group. I agree. It was a great group.
I loved when you came in and stole almost every scene. There was that one episode where Charlie Harper was dating the clone of you, and her name was Lydia.
Yes.
And you guys were in a standoff against each other, and it was just priceless comedy.
Yes. Oh, well, that was because she's a wonderful actress. She just won the Emmy for The Pit.
Yes.
Catherine Lanassa, Lady Lanassa, one of my favorite people on planet Earth. Yeah.
Well, that was just so great. And I look at a lot of television now, and I have to say, I don't see the same quality of the writing and the performance and the kind of tightness of things that had in that show that had us coming back every week to see it.
Well, things happen in cycles. I mean, that was a very regimented show. It had its own formulas that it followed pretty religiously. And, the writers were incredibly great. Chuck Lorre is a very disciplined, amazing writer, an amazing producer of material, just a lot. I mean, he just keeps churning out shows, wonderful ideas for shows. He's very smart, as you can imagine. He created that
Big Bang Theory.
Big Bang Theory, exactly.
Yeah.
He's very erudite in a number of fields, and he's got a very, very big brain, certainly a big comedy brain.
So 2 years after that premiered, you went out and did something. You bought a house by Rudolph Schindler.
I did. That was a very, very big deal. And it sort of happened in a half-assed kind of way because I was actually trying to leave LA. I was trying to pull up my roots here and reestablish my roots in New York, even though I was on that show. I think I started that show after I already sold my house that I had in the hills and went into a rental, hoping to hasten my way into New York. And the landlord of the rental suddenly told me, you have to move, I'm selling my house. And I had only been in it like 9 months. And I had to get out right away. And I called my realtor and said, find me a rental. I don't care what it is. I don't care at all. I just need to move right away. I'm in production and I don't have any time. And he brought me to this house. And he said, I don't know, this is exactly what you had in mind. It was actually for sale. I said, Constantine, I don't want to buy anything for starters. I don't want to buy. I don't want to own. I want to rent, and I don't want to rent anything of consequence. I'm trying to wend my way back east. We pulled up to this house, and I said, what in hell? Because it was, the entryway was so striking and so stunning. And I walked in and I just said, damn you, what have you done to me? And I had to have it. I knew that day I had to have it. So I bought it.
So you walked in not knowing that it was a Schindler and it had this pedigree and all that?
No. Not knowing anything. He knew me well enough to know I would just fall for it. Big time, instantly.
And how long did it take for you to find the Schindler community or vice versa?
Well, there is a ready-made one in that there's the Schindler owners sort of have a loose association, sharing information. You can always get a list of who the owners are, and some of them are more participatory than others. So I think I had a tiny little tour when I first moved in before I really did anything. And I haven't done much of anything to it except some little additions like the open work carport underneath the house.
Mm-hmm. I
glassed in the panels. The actual openings of the beams I glassed in so that I could make it an actual room. But you would never know that. That has nothing to do with the actual structure. I didn't change the structure. I just added the glass. And that was a very ingenious kind of thing, actually.
That was very thoughtful change.
Things like that.
Yeah. Now, I saw recently that you were at the LA premiere of Valentina Ganova's new film, Schindler's Space Architect.
Yes.
How was it?
It's a wonderful, and she's a wonderful creative person. And it's so persuasive a film that I guess she sent a link to it or something. I'm not sure the order that this happened in, but she had to have it, a voiceover commentary. And, she's a really wonderful, full of spirit woman. And I guess that part of her said, why not go for one of the great voices? And so I guess she got in touch with Meryl Streep's people and sent the link and said, would you consider doing this voiceover? Thinking nothing would come of it, but why not aim high? And Miss Streep got back to her and said, yes, I'd be delighted to do it. So she got Meryl Streep as the narrator,
yes,
which is amazing, but not a surprise because it's really a lovely film. And also, I have a strong emotional attachment to Schindler. I don't know a ton about him. I haven't probed into his life, but I know the broad strokes. And the fact is that he, in his early career, he was so inventive and so original and, made a real entry into the world of architecture from Vienna, but working here in California, and had so many striking ideas inside, outside. a house where you could move through it and be outside and then be back inside again. And that's certainly true of my house. I have two very, very deep porches, one facing east for morning sun and one facing west. But the overhang is 8 feet. So it's really like a room outside.
Yes.
Both of them are. So I have very wonderful light swimming through the house, but I don't have direct sunlight coming in, making everything hot and horrible, except in the morning, in the morning and at the end of the day when the sun is very low. And then the rest of the time, the sun just pours through the clear story windows, which I must have, I don't know, 7 or 8 scattered through the house, all at different ceiling heights. You know, and I see people with, especially in LA where there's so much that's imitative, I see constructions, box-like houses, and they have a big window, and then they have a slit window above it. And they're thinking that's a clear story window. And in fact, there's no ceiling height and there's no roof, there's no connective. It's just a window on top of a window, which is not what a clear story window is. Clear story window usually involves a ceiling height that changes and allowing light to come in that wouldn't come in if there was no window there. So it's interesting how his ideas can be stretched so thin as to not have their importance any longer. But when he started out, I mean, he was such a revolutionary and so attractive to so many people and such an important man and so full of ideas. And a lot of his confrères were of the same ilk, Neutra and some other people around him. And they all branched out and did different things. And at some point, when was the great international show that he was left out of? When was
that? In the 30s.
In the 30s. And remind me the architects.
The Museum of Modern Art?
No, but the curator.
Philip Johnson?
Philip Johnson, who's, of course, a great force in architecture, curated this show of what modern architecture was in California architecture. And inexplicably, no one can offer any opinion as to why he did this. He left Schindler out. No one has ever offered a reason why that would make any sense at all. And it was really, I mean, I don't know what Schindler's letter said or what public comments he might have made about it. I just found the facts on the face of it too horrible.
Yes.
And I just didn't, I live in a house he built. And it was one of his 2 last houses. I feel his presence. I feel the presence of his incredible mind that could turn volumes upside down and inside out. And I'm looking right now at the blueprints for this house and the cabinetry.
That's beautiful.
Which goes through to the other room on the other side is so complicated that he freehand drew a drawing of it on the blueprints, I'm sure, to show the builder what it would look like in the end, because from the drawings it would take someone like him to be able to decipher them. So he was left out of this extraordinarily important event. And as a result, he had no future, in a sense, internationally. He got no major appointments ever after. All he could do was private residences.
It really crushed him, yes.
I mean, there are many great houses. Some of his great houses have been torn down, alas. The Lovell House, I think, out in Catalina, and a few other houses. This house remains, and a designer friend of mine, not knowing it was a Schindler, came in and walked around the house and was really kind of thunderstruck by it. He could right away absorb some of the principal ideas expressed in this house. And he said, this is a very mature house. A, he didn't know it was by Schindler. B, he didn't know it was one of the 2 final houses. So it has a lot of power for me, that the knowledge of that terrible disappointment this man had.
When we were speaking earlier, you talked about that you could feel his sorrow in the house.
I can't. And I'm given me, I go down rabbit holes. I have terrible ADD. I can pick up a book and I read a sentence in it and I sit down and I look at the pictures and photographs. It's a biography and I get lost in it. I'm like, what am I doing? I've got to start getting ready for this thing I have to go to, And I have never explored his personal response to that because I know what it is. He was devastated. His career was over. His career was emasculated. And I think, and I haven't explored this either, because it's like, I don't want to know the details. It's too awful. Apparently, Philip Johnson, late in his life, said it was the worst mistake he ever made. Did you know that?
I did not know that.
Yeah.
I have not gotten to see the movie yet. Were you involved in the production of that at all?
No, not at all.
Okay.
And I don't remember if she mentions that. It wasn't a biography. So, I mean, I don't know whether she explored that so much, but I just know, because I've been told, and because I've read the scant details, and because I know what his life was like, that it just basically eclipsed his career.
And he died rather young, I think, in 1953.
Yes, and he was in his 30s, and he died of cancer. And I don't know, I think of Europeans as being much healthier than Americans. Dying at 30-something, whatever he was, is kind of appalling. I think there's nothing like disappointment, resentment, feeling abandoned, and also being disappointed in your art. It's one thing to be disappointed, in life in a general kind of way, but to have your work just disregarded, it's too cruel. It's just too awful.
One of the interesting stories about Schindler is that when he was dying in 1953, remarkably, he shared a hospital room with Richard Neutra.
It's true. It's just amazing. I wonder what their conversation was.
According to his son Raymond, they made up a long feud that they had had since they had parted ways since the King's Roadhouse.
Yes.
And of course, Neutra went off to a very colorful, successful career, different from Schindler.
Yes. In fact, all modernist architects had very much more striking lives and accomplished great things, and Schindler built homes. I mean, it's just so wrong. It's just heartbreaking. I mean, I'm in some of Neutra's houses. I'm unmoved by them. I mean, there's often great theatricality when you walk in.
Yes. The Schindler houses have a certain kind of vibe, I would call it.
Yes.
That you just get caught up in. It's like being in a slow-moving whirlpool that kind of wraps you around you.
Yes. And my house, there's kind of a central hub. You can walk around. It's got 8 doors and very few windows per se, except for the clerestory windows on the walls. It's just, yes, you swirl around in circles. You can circle into the guest room in the front entryway, and then circle into the living room, and then that leads you into the bedroom, and then that goes out to the front porch, which leads you into the guest room. I mean, it's just endless, all those doors. And when they're all open, which they mostly are, it is like living inside, outside.
So, Holland, you were heading to New York 20 years ago. Are you still wanting to go there? Or are you going to hang around in this house a while longer?
Well, I did get a place there. I decided that I really needed to have a place there. And I expect that I will probably have to segue from this house into something a little easier to take care of in a year or two. But I probably won't have to be in an apartment here, because I do have an apartment in New York and I work in both cities. Or actually now I'm about to leave for Texas, where I'll be working for a while. And so I have to travel for work. I did a play earlier this year. That means New York. And I'm not about to be staying in a hotel.
Right.
So I had an apartment in the Upper West Side. First time I lived up there, because I lived down at McDougal and Houston for about 30 years. I went uptown to live in a friend's building because he and I are very close, and I thought it would be lovely to see him a lot, and I do. But I'm in my 80s. I mean, I don't want to be some little old lady in an Upper West Side apartment. I was not on the street. I looked out over a garden. And some people say, oh, you look out over a garden, how wonderful. I said, no, because I just feel like, where am I?
Yeah.
So I got a glass box up in the sky.
Okay.
High up. It's a very modest apartment. It's very simple. And just a 1-bedroom, simple apartment. But it's very high up, and it's all glass.
And you just see everywhere.
Everywhere.
That's wonderful.
So even if you're home and saying, oh, I still feel poorly, I'm going to stay home and read the New Yorker. I mean, you've got the world outside your window, and you don't feel like an old lady in a shoe. Not that I could ever really feel like an old lady in a shoe, but I can certainly feel like an old lady, I can tell you that.
Well, thank you so much for buying the house and being its steward for all of this time. All of us Schindler fans, thank you for that and your devotion to it.
It's my pleasure. I'll have to do an open house before I leave this house for sure.
George was chatting with actor and Schindler homeowner Holland Taylor. Now let's move a little east to Palm Springs, everyone's favorite destination for mid-century modern, and two great ways to see the town where literally thousands of houses still survive and thrive. First up, Shann Carr is known for her sharp wit, storytelling, and 40 years as a stand-up comedian. Now her Snarkitecture walking tours offer a unique and humorous exploration of Palm Springs' queer history and architecture. Here's George with Shann Carr.
Shann, how did you get started in comedy? I understand that there was something that happened at 19 and you said, I got to do that.
Yeah, I saw one of the first couple of people to ever be a gay comedian.
Yeah.
It wasn't a job. And it took 5 seconds for me to think I would love to do that. And within a few weeks, I'd made up a fake press kit that made it look like I was famous and lied to a local club and got them to book me. And a few weeks later, I went on tour with no gigs. I had no idea what I was doing, but I never stopped since.
That's great. Do you remember who that comedian was?
Yeah, it was Kate Clinton.
Okay. I recognize that name.
Yes, working still today. My comedy is nothing like hers, but just that freedom of spirit. My mother, who was studying for her PhD in child psychology, named my own dysfunction for me. It was called compulsive disclosure, which is the ability to tell what's appropriate to share.
Yeah.
And luckily, the greatest revenge is to have paid the mortgage with that dysfunction.
Yeah. Put your diagnosis to work.
Exactly.
So you started touring very young in your 20s?
At 19.
At 19.
I had come out about 6 months before, and adapting to the queer community was so much comedy in my head right away.
Yeah.
Back in the day, there was no such thing as a gay comic, much less one touring. And we had a little book, the Dameron Guide, and it was every gay bar, restaurant, or friendly place or whatever. It was like our green book, basically.
Yeah.
And I would look up clubs and get gigs and spent almost a year in a pickup truck with my girlfriend and a dog from the pound, going from weird little gay bar to gay bar, trying to talk them into turning off the disco and letting me.
And to do a set.
Yep. It was a good challenge because, they were there to dance.
Yeah.
So, yeah, eventually I got real gigs where people were coming to see me and it was right. I found the right thing at the right time. Only recently, a lot of family members passed away, and it put a shift in me, and I stopped touring for almost 9 years. I'm just going back at it, but I'd never had a home ever, even as a child. We never lived anywhere for long. Military parents, touring at 19.
Okay.
So I bought a house in Palm Springs at just the right crash, because otherwise some queer comedian is not getting a home loan.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So I got my cute little pad in 2010 for $126.
Wow. What a deal.
What a deal. Yeah. It was a disaster. Everything was wrong with it, but it was in foreclosure and I've been here since 2010. And now I have a home. I have volunteered with every organization in my city. I've dealt with the government structure in a big way. I just finished up an event that was with the city in a city park called Art in the Park in the Dark. And so I've just never had that kind of connection to a place. And modernism was part of anchoring me here.
Yes.
And I didn't seek it, but if you live here and your head is up, modernism finds you.
And Palm Springs is one of the largest gay communities, I think, in the United States, isn't it?
Yeah, we're up in the top, like, per capita kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like, our city council finally has a straight person on it again. We had an L, a G, a B, a T, and a Q, and many gay mayors. And I moved to Palm Springs in 98 from San Francisco. And then the rest of San Francisco followed me here. Basically, even my dinner parties are like they were 20 years ago because they all got here. And yeah, that movement, other people saw dusty old ranch homes and ticky-tacky stuff. And we saw places to put a statement palm and how to, find an old Ames chair, whatever. It was fun to be here for that queering and remodernism. Is that a word?
Yes, close
Remodernism.
enough.
Was that an answer to anything that you asked me?
That's perfect. And that time period was really the renaissance
Yeah.
of Palm Springs,
Yeah,
where
it
everyone
was.
was rediscovering the houses again. Later on, and around the mid 2000s, Modernism Week would get fired up, and people were starting to buy these things and create a whole community of people who love the architecture. Whereas in the 70s and 80s, it was just these old houses sitting over there doing nothing.
Yeah. Well, my neighborhood in Palm Springs, it was built as the Veterans Tract,
Okay.
1960 and on. And they got all the wood and stuff all laid out to build this for soldiers coming home. And for whatever reason, I don't think they ever determined it. All of the building supplies for the neighborhood burned in place while they were waiting to go up. So the Veterans Track was a little bit later than they thought it was going to be, and it wound up like 1960. And so these houses all have that modernism look, but they were made as government, relief houses and all kinds of stuff. So at least in this little area of Demuth Park, most of our houses are exactly the same. And over those many years, I was a realtor, mostly recreationally, and so I pretty much got to go into every house in the 100 houses around me at some point.
Yeah.
They're exactly like mine and completely different. How they have remodeled 70% of them now. So it's been fun to watch, my own house do better
Yes.
in someone else's hands, honestly.
Now, tell me about your walking tours.
So it started 10 years ago. There were a couple of conventions coming to town. The Gay Realtors Convention was among them. And during this period where everybody was passing in my family, I just wasn't very funny. And they asked me if I would do a comedy show. And I said, I don't know if I can. So I pulled this new idea out of my tuchus that we would rent a bus and make a tour available to the queer realtors, since I'm a queer realtor and a comedian. And again, I really had to study. I didn't know. I took every little tour, every other tour guide, kind of.
Yeah.
Most of whom I knew casually because it's a tiny town. And now I'm doing it through the LGBT Center. It's called the Snarkitecture Tour because I am not the biggest purist and the most knowledgeable of all. There would be no way to be on a walking tour in this town and not have a couple people on your tour know more than you about something.
Yeah.
Right? So I really did go into this to learn by doing and get from the bossy, smarty pants old queens who are going to wind up on the tour with me. And I have learned something from each of them, each of the 3 weeks so far. The neighborhood that we're doing is Warm Sands, and it's where all of the little boutique resorts that are in that area, a big chunk of them became gay men's clothing optional resorts.
Okay.
There were like 18 of them.
What part of town is that in Palm Springs?
They were in Warm Sands, which is where this walking tour is. And that goes from Sunrise to Palm Canyon and Sunny Dunes to Ramon. That is the Warm Sands neighborhood.
Okay.
And there have been as many as 30 of these clothing optional resorts at one time. There are not as many now. But one by one, these little resorts were bought. Even one of them that we toured the other day, and they've let us into a couple of them, which is strictly kind of doesn't happen.
Yeah. Right.
Each case, they were locals who have never been inside of that resort or claim to have never been inside. Anyway, so it had been last owned by Zsa Zsa Gabor.
Wow.
And it was sold to Bob, or I think his name was, that then made it a resort. So these places were all little boutiques. Also, all these tiny little things that have 4 rooms or 6 or 10 or 12 rooms. Some of them were built to house the now staffs of the hotels that were coming up.
Okay.
So this neighborhood has like stuff from the very beginning, the 20s and 30s and 40s, Spanish revival, Spanish colonial, Adobe, and all of this. And then it has a bunch of 50s, mid-century 50s and 60s. And then ranch houses were built in there. And all through that, the little boutique hotels became more and more of all different sorts in that little neighborhood, but nothing like a hotel, right?
Right.
I think the biggest one has 40 rooms, and that's Exotic Dreams, which was a famous gay men's resort for a very long time, where a director, Chi LaRue, used to shoot videos and stuff. And now it's a straight swingers resort.
Oh, okay.
And now a big chunk of what had been the men's resorts are now straight swingers, clothing optional resorts. And the guys are all pouting because,
Yeah.
people bought their resorts. I'm like, well, then buy it.
Now, what is the big gay resort that has the bridge over Indian Canyon?
So it isn't necessarily gay. It is
Okay.
nudist and swingers.
Okay.
And there were a bunch of little resorts that became two places on either side of the street.
Okay.
And one set of them became a clothing optional resort, and the other part became condos. But in the interim, naked people were running back and forth across the street, as the lore goes again. And the city had had enough of, chasing the ball across the street. And so they made an over walking bridge. There is not another in the town. The fact that it was built because of nudists is hysterical. The migration of the nudist from the resort to the condo. And so then at some point, the story goes that you could kind of see through it more than they wanted you to see through
Yeah.
So there's a band now that is not see-through, and now we joke and call it the Bridge of Thighs.
That's hilarious.
Yeah. So it's just been fun. A lot of the first settlers in the 20s and 30s, McManus created the Water District and was anchored in that Warm Sands neighborhood. And Pearl McManus's house is there. And in that Warm Sands neighborhood, which is somewhere that they made space for people who were getting blacklisted.
Okay.
Celebrities and actors. Palm Springs always kind of been that little bit of a hideout, right? There's said to be a house in that neighborhood too. And again, I just wound up inside of it because it was for sale and I got a viewing. It takes all the way up between two streets on one side, and it's Spanish. Anyway, there's a turret at the top, and there's a little apartment in part of that turret, and a whole wall of it is tiny little 3x5 filing cabinets. I think it was like they said Al Capone hid there and did books and banks there. And I'd heard the tale, but it must be because there's that whole wall of file. It was cool.
That's really cool. Now, where can people contact you to go on these tours?
ShannCarr.com.
That's ShannCarr.com.
Yep. 2 N's, 2 R's. The reason I got keyed into any of it is because there's a group called 1PS, which is the Organized Neighborhoods of Palm Springs. And they've been really diligent. There are 52 official neighborhoods now. And when I started being the volunteer rep for my neighborhood, because I was trying to be all nerdy and anchored into my community, turns out that they had the rights to do a Modernism home tour as a fundraiser for their organization.
Yeah.
Through Modernism Week.
Yeah.
But, those neighborhood organizations are a bunch of Gladys Kravitzes, basically, right?
That's from Bewitched, isn't it?
Yes. So there wasn't anybody, the people who did it had no sense of modernism, right? Or architecture or anything. And nor did I. But the fact that I am now tasked, and I was for 5 years, to find 5 homes for their thing, I learned my expletive.
The website is ShannCarr.com. Shann, thanks so much for talking with me.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Now we'll be riding shotgun with J.D. Cargill, the creator of Dragonfly Tours, an entertaining way to see Palm Springs in an exceptionally customized bus. It's a rolling mix of architecture, old Hollywood history, music, comedy, and drag. You'll cruise past icons like Sinatra's Twin Palms, the Kaufman House, Frey House 2, and Liberace landmarks, all while J.D. is narrating and performing. Here's J.D. Cargill's conversation with George Smart.
J.D., you started a very interesting business in November of 2024, one I had not seen before, except in New York. Tell me about what you've got started, because it's really successful.
Oh, thanks, George. Yeah, last year we opened Dragonfly Tours in Palm Springs, California. It is probably not only California's, but maybe the whole country's most unique sightseeing experience. We are a dazzling 90-minute journey through Palm Springs, hosted by a fabulous drag queen on board a remarkable vehicle that has been completely refabricated in order to become a theater on wheels. It has 13 luxury seats reclaimed from an actual cinema up in Northern California. We ripped off the top of this 26-foot long shuttle bus. We ripped off the side of it, and we replaced it all with a 70 square foot picture window. So these two stadium rows of 13 seats all face one big picture window. So everyone's sitting perpendicular to the driver, riding sort of sideways. It's really taken off. When I was conceiving of this idea of how to make a neighborhood-friendly vehicle with unparalleled views, it's also drag and elevated, my research brought me to that, what you were referring to in New York City's The Ride.
Yeah.
It's a huge Taylor Swift-sized tour bus, that has done the same thing. They took off the side, they make it one big window, and they have 4 stadium rows of sort of bench seating. And they ride around New York City and Manhattan, and performers come out and they do little things, and there's actors in the crowd. They have a lot more people. Our 13 seats makes it quite an intimate experience. And so it's really just about connecting with your queen and her comedy and music and fun. And then the love of Palm Springs, I think, really comes through all of our storytelling, including all of our video vignettes. And that's how I keep my presence on every show. My character, Anita Dahl, the sightseeing queen of Palm Springs, is your video host through the tour, while your live drag queen, Miss B Guided, you can call her Miss Guided, everyone does, is your live hostess who brings all the entertainment and connects all the stories and sights together live. One of our big goals and missions was not only to be loved and appreciated by tourists, but also to be welcomed by locals. And we have proudly said in our more than 6,000 seats sold now, many, many, many locals. 30% of our volume comes from locals coming to check things out. And then repeat business. Those locals are bringing back guests and friends when they come and visit from out of town. Because I think our attraction is so great for people to get an overview of Palm Springs in this really colorful way.
You started this at the Thompson Palm Springs, which is the new hotel in town, right?
That's right. Thompson Palm Springs. They're 414 North Palm Canyon Drive. We consider her our birth mother because with the first 3 months of our existence, when I was doing all the shows myself live, and we just had one queen and one driver, we were there all through the holidays, November, December 2024. And we love them. And we still work with the Thompson all the time with private tours. The only problem was Thompson Hotel is on a one-way street. And so we were boarding on the Indian Canyon side, which is fine, but it was a big walk for the Queen and Heels and some of our guests. So for the majority of 2025, we were at Market, which is the old Stein Mart in Palm Springs.
Yeah.
Huge 46,000 square foot open air sort of vintage department store. And it's flat, free parking, easy water, bathrooms. They had a bottle shop for people to buy anything they wanted to go. And it was just ideal. And so we were there all the way till June 2025 when it got so hot that we wanted to have later shows, but the market closed at 5. We decided to make one more move over to Hyatt, the Hyatt Palm Springs, which is the same family as Thompson. And they're just a little bit more centrally located. We partnered there for the summer of 2025. But a couple months in, the fire marshal came by and said, nope, these decorations, which were hiding a lot of deferred maintenance, no shade. Once this fire marshal shut us down, I was like, I'm so sorry, we can't stay here. And so when this space in downtown Palm Springs became available for us to lease ourselves and create our own headquarters, that was what we did. And so September, we found it. And I'm happy to say that we just passed our fire inspection. We were open for business. Come and visit us, 267 East Tuckwitz Canyon Way in Palm Springs, California.
Tell me some of the places that your tour goes to.
Okay, it is a combination of about 50 iconic sites that includes former celebrity homes like the homes of Frank Sinatra and Bob Hope and Elvis Presley and Marilyn Monroe. And then also iconic Palm Springs icons like the Ariel Tram and the windmills and the Art District Art Museum and our fabulous Forever Maryland statue and some other public art figures like the neighbors that feature the Rat Pack and stuff around town. We weave it all into a script that's a story across 5 eras of history here. That includes the Agua Caliente, which were the natives that were first people that lived here for thousands of years. And then our founding mothers, Old Hollywood, mid-century modernism, and finally the gays. We get through those chapters in 90 minutes, and along the way we see these homes that I've mentioned, as well as some other iconic sites, but you're also hearing some comedy. Of course, we drive right down the heart of Palm Canyon Drive and show everybody our fabulous Walk of Stars. Like Hollywood has a Walk of Fame. Well, we have a Walk of Stars here in Palm Springs.
Yes, you do.
And it is fabulous, and all kinds of great actors and actresses and entertainers and philanthropists and artists. And here we also honor the architects. Palm Springs is on the map for a lot of reasons, but one of the biggest is just our incredible amount of mid-century modern architecture. And so those E. Stewart Williams and Charles Dubois, William Kreisel and Don Wexler, the master of steel. I love him so much. He actually designed the building that we lease out of now. They all have stars on the Walk of Stars as well. Theirs are located over by the small architecture museum, which is part of the Palm Springs Art Museum, and it's totally free. So people should check it out.
There's a particular stop on Alejo Road at Our Lady of Solitude Catholic Church. What happens there?
What an interesting question. Our Lady of Solitude Catholic Church is famous for a lot of reasons. One is because Liberace, the famed entertainer from the 70s and 80s, he basically invented the Las Vegas residency, right? He was a piano virtuoso. He wore highly glamorous clothes. He was very flamboyant. Today, we know he was a closeted homosexual, but in his life, he had never had the chance to come out. He lived right across the street from Our Lady of Solitude, little kind of catty corner there, in a home called the Cloisters. It was a convent that he purchased, turned into his fabulous estate. So he lived across the street from this little church, Our Lady of Solitude.
Yeah.
And so flash forward to January 1987, when he died of complications of AIDS and pneumonia, right there in his home. Our Lady of Solitude Catholic Church is right there on Alejo as well. And that's where his private funeral ceremony was held. And if you know the Steven Soderbergh film from 2013, I believe, called Behind the Candelabra, it was filmed here, part of it. And that scene outside of Our Lady of Solitude Catholic Church is part of the movie. You can see Matt Damon walking across the street. That's who played his lover. It's a funeral scene.
Yeah.
But yeah, the exterior of that church is there. And it's a big moment on our tours. You know, we really lean into our celebrity history and architecture and culture and mid-century modernism. So those stories that Anita tells, you know, are a lot about that, like the 100-mile rule. People don't always know, why did Hollywood choose Palm Springs to be its backyard playground?
Right.
Why not Santa Barbara or San Diego or Laguna Beach or some fabulous place along the coast? Well, Palm Springs had this distinct double-edged sword. One, it was 110 miles away from the studios, which was perfect. It was a 2-hour rule that all actors and performers, back then, the studio contracts were very strict. So they had to be back within 2 hours. And so that made Palm Springs the perfect distance. That's called the 100-mile rule. And then the other thing was, unlike those coastal cities, which a lot of press and media could get to quite easily, this was just outside the reach of the tabloid journalists. The publishers wouldn't pay for them to come this far. And so in those early days, and I'm talking more like in the 20s and 30s, the Rudolph Valentino, you know, Shirley Temple era, those days, the press wasn't coming out here yet. And so they were literally outside of the reach of the limelight. And it was a perfect place for stars to really come and feel like they could let their hair down, rest and relax. And that's why people like Liberace and Cary Grant and Marlene Dietrich and Tallulah Bankhead and Tab Hunter and Rock Hudson, and the list goes on of closeted movie stars and entertainers who would come to Palm Springs regularly to really be themselves. And frankly, it helped plant the seed, I think, for what we see today in Palm Springs, which is this just enormous inclusivity. You know, we just installed a 65-foot tall pride pole with a massive flag, gay pride flag, that is waving year-round over our city. It's like in Palm Springs, pride never stops. And so some of that comes from that Hollywood era when so many gay closeted stars were here, I think sort of planting the seed for privacy and authenticity.
And isn't it true that your city council is all gay?
Yeah, in 2017, Palm Springs was the first city to have 100% gay city council. Currently, I don't believe that's true.
Okay.
And it was during that era, 2018, the next year, that, you know, a lot of cities around the country, you know, the right wing and MAGA folks, they like to use drag queens as like boogeymen, right? They like to use us as this symbol of somehow things that are not right in our country and grooming their children for bad things. And it's just a bunch of baloney. But they get riled up, and they have cities like Nashville and other places that pass city ordinances that prohibit drag queens from performing, you know, within a certain number of feet of schools or in public, and it just hinders their careers. Palm Springs stood up and said, you know what? We're going to be a drag sanctuary town, a place where drag queens are protected and feel safe. And they literally put up a sign in the Arenas district, which is like our little neighborhood, you know, our Castro or West Hollywood. And it says Drag Queen Crossing. Isn't that fabulous?
Wow. Now, where can people find out more about Dragonfly tours and make reservations?
Well, our website, of course, Drag and Fly Tours. That's drag, DRAGANDFLY TOURS. dragonflytours.com. Dragonfly Tours is the number one place where you can find information about us. We're also available online at Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. On your favorite social media, you would just Google the same handle, Dragonfly Tours.
JD, thanks for joining me. This has been fun.
Very fun. Thank you, George.
That was George's conversation with Palm Springs tour guide J.D. Cargill. Arthur Elrod became known as the design king of the desert, shaping interiors for everyone who was anyone in Palm Springs during the 1950s through his tragic death in the 1970s. His work evolved from cozy traditional rooms to the sleek modernism we now associate with Palm Springs cool. Adele Cygelman, the author of Palm Springs Modern, spent 6 years researching Elrod, and the documentary Arthur Elrod Modern Cool premiered at Modernism Week. Here's George and Adele Cygelman.
Adele, before we start talking about Arthur Elrod, tell me a little bit about your interview with Artie Shaw, one of my favorite band leaders from way back.
Oh, my goodness. Well, that was at Los Angeles Magazine, early 1980s. And I was just really a copy editor there. They let us handle what they called a section called Peoplescapes, I think it was. And our publisher, Jeff Miller, was a huge jazz fan and a huge Artie Shaw fan. And Artie Shaw had famously hung up his clarinet, decades ago. And he had come out of retirement and he was playing at the Disneyland Hotel, of all places. And they let me interview him.
Oh, cool. What was he like?
It was lovely. I've always heard that he had this reputation of being very gruff and not exactly a great interview. He was one of those people who was just, he wanted to play his music and get married multiple times and live his life. And he was just delightful. I mean, I asked him some stupid questions, of course, like, why Disneyland? And he was like, well, it's actually a good venue for me. I just felt like such an idiot, but it was great. I was so happy to have had the chance to talk to him.
I learned recently that his band is still going.
Wow.
Along with Glenn Miller's band and Tommy Dorsey's band. They are still touring after all these years, of course, with new personnel. But it's so fabulous to see this music gaining new fans.
Well, when I was a kid, I loved big band music. I was a huge Glenn Miller fan and a big Benny Goodman fan.
Well, let's shift to architecture and interior design. Arthur Elrod, I was surprised to learn, was born near me in Anderson, South Carolina, on a farm. And so how did he get into interior design from the backwaters of Anderson, South Carolina?
I know, right? It's a long road. So he went to Clemson. It was then, I believe, all-male military school, and they offered courses in agriculture or textiles, because obviously it's in the South, and textiles were huge.
Yes.
So we're talking late 1930s, early 1940s when he would have attended. And it was very common for all the boys in that area to go to Clemson. He took some courses in textile engineering, and then I think he went to work for a department store in Atlanta. And then he went to the Chenard Art Institute in Los Angeles to actually take a course in interior design. Why he chose Chenard, no one knows. No one will ever know. But that's what brought him to the West Coast. So early, mid-1940s. And Chenard was this incredible institution that trained people in not just fine art, but in interior design and in costume design and animation and everything that was needed for the burgeoning film industry back then.
So how did he get to Palm Springs?
Chenard was around the corner near downtown LA from the great Bullock's Wilshire department store. I think that he didn't have money. I think that he probably worked at that Bullock store to earn money. Maybe he was doing window dressing as he was in Atlanta. Maybe he was working in another department. But that's why I think in 1947, he went to Palm Springs for the first time to work for Bullock's, the new Bullock's store that was just opening up. And it had a home furnishings department up on the second floor, which is where everyone in town went to buy their furniture.
Now, I understand he left for a while to go to San Francisco, but came back to Palm Springs in 1954. And by then, he had a boyfriend, Harold.
Correct. So he went to San Francisco for a couple of years to work for W&J Sloan, which was a big furnishings emporium. And he worked in the modern furnishings department there. And that's where he met Hal Broderick. And he also did this incredible exhibit up there for General Electric. They were celebrating the 75th anniversary of the fluorescent light bulb. And so he did this installation inside the San Francisco Museum of Art. He created a penthouse with a living room, a terrace, a dining area, furnished it with Rob's John Gibbings line for Widdicombe. It was probably the first time it appeared on the West Coast. He had a Ruth Asawa sculpture in a corner. And that's where he really learned how to control lighting in an interior. When he did return to Palm Springs with Hal and another woman, Barbara Willis, he already had a whole clientele built in.
Somewhere between 1954, though, and the time that Diamonds Are Forever came out featuring his house, he must have had a real boom. So what really turned the corner for Elrod with his business during that time?
I think it was a very steady build-up and a steady evolution. He came to Palm Springs at a perfect time. He was, a modernist, and he was a contemporary of all the architects there at the time. Contemporary of Stuart Williams, William Cody, Donald Wexler, and Rick Harrison. They were all about the same age. He had the same modernist sensibility. And I think he was a breath of fresh air, and they all turned to him to work on their homes together, which was fantastic. And it was also when Palm Springs was booming and becoming a resort town. It was changing from a village. So he was slowly but very steadily evolving in his own design practice as well, going from mixing antiques with some modern stuff to going full on just modernism and bringing in a lot of new furnishings and lighting from Europe that nobody else was doing.
But to be able to get to the point where he commissions a John Lautner house, particularly of that stature, and have it featured in a James Bond movie, must have been huge.
I think it was huge. I think that house changed his whole life and his whole trajectory. He almost became more famous than any of his clients. It was a true collaboration with John Lautner. I think he was very comfortable at that stage in life. I think that he was very confident. He was traveling around the world. He was doing projects all over the place. And I've never been able to pinpoint why exactly he asked John Lautner to design the house. People think that they had mutual friends who introduced them. But yes, instead of going to a Palm Springs architect, he went completely in a different direction. The only thing that I've read that points to why is he visited the Breuer Whitney Museum of Art in New York and loved all the concrete. So maybe there's a connector there.
Was that the first instance of the super modern house being the lair of the villain in movies?
Oh, good question. Because I'm sure, because Diamonds Are Forever wasn't one of the first films in the Bond series. And I'm sure that there were others, but of course now I can't, off the top of my head, I can't think of anything.
I think there was a modernist house in a couple of Hitchcock films earlier than that. But it kind of solidified this idea that modernism was where this nefarious character would hang out with henchmen. There were always henchmen, although in this case, there were women in bikinis as security guards, as I remember. Bambi and Thumper.
I've always wondered how Disney felt about that. Yes, I think you're probably right. And definitely a lot of concrete for Villain's Lair. I mean, that just sort of went hand in hand, didn't it? You have to have concrete and glass and not much else. But I will say, when you watch that clip, apart from a handful of props, Bambi hanging from a trapeze and some pipes to make noise, everything in that room that you see was Arthur Elrod's. That's how he lived. It was his furnishings, his art. And I think that's probably very unusual. They didn't have to bring in a lot of props.
And I think it's one of the few times that James Bond really got his ass handed to him in a scene, because they pretty much clobbered him there.
He got dunked. And then his friend Felix Leiter runs in and finds him doing the breaststroke.
Yes, yes.
The line.
Arthur Elrod enjoyed such immense popularity after that. What were some of the key commissions that he got in the late 60s and early 70s?
So usually he would work for a client in the Palm Springs area and do their vacation home, and then they would ask him to work on their main residence, which could be anywhere. And one of the biggest commissions they got was up in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, for Dwayne Hagedorn, who was originally a newspaper publisher and then became a resort developer. And for him, they did the main residence for Dwayne and his wife. Huge house with an indoor basketball court and ice skating rink and what have you.
Wow.
They did his office, which was at the end of a pier. It was like a 2-story structure because they were floating logs down river at the wood pier. They used to load them onto boats, and then they converted that into an office for him. And the third thing was a lake cabin used just only in the summer in the middle of Lake Coeur d'Alene. So it was like 3 structures that they worked on, and that was pretty big. They did most famously, I think, the Johnson Publishing headquarters in Chicago for John and Eunice Johnson. They were the publishers of Ebony and Jet. They were working with John Matusami, who was an African-American architect on the building. They selected Arthur Elrod and his associate William Reiser to do every square inch of the interiors. Every floor was a different color combination. Every square inch was custom designed. And they had an incredible collection of African and African-American art and sculpture. It was a real tribute to African American culture at a time when they were becoming like a burgeoning middle class and upper class in this country. That was, I think, the biggest, largest project. And then, of course, there were a couple of Lautner projects that Arthur Elrod was supposed to be working on before his death.
How did he die?
He and Bill Reiser left the house on Southridge early one morning. I think it was a Monday. They were driving on Farrell, which is like one of the main north-south cross streets. And a 17-year-old who was running late for high school ran a light. And they were in Reiser's Fiat convertible. Arthur Elrod never wore a seatbelt, and they were both killed.
What year was this?
February 1974. He was 49 years old.
Wow. That's really quite young.
Very young. And I always wanted to sort of say, look, just go back in time. Call him on the phone. Tell him just to wait like 2 minutes. That's all it would have taken.
What happened to the house after that, his famous house?
There was a guy named Steve Maloney and his first wife, Patricia. Steve was very familiar with Palm Springs. His grandparents were Donald and Genevieve Gilmore, who had a home in Smoke Tree. And he had visited them when he was a child. They had had their house done by Albert Frey. He had seen the house, the Elrod house, in Architectural Digest, called up to find out about it, found out that it was being sold by Hal Broderick, and they bought it pretty much sight unseen. I did find out fairly recently that unfortunately they were the ones who started taking it apart. They started replacing the lovely herringbone slate floors with parquet so that they could put their oriental rugs down. They recovered those fabulous sofas with this sort of gray, blue, checkered fabric, which is too bad. Steve was a lovely guy, and he became one of the trustees of the Palm Springs Art Museum. And then it just sort of went through a couple of different hands until it ended up with Ron Burkle, who started to restore it, and then he sold it. And now it's just been going through a fantastic restoration by the current owner, Jeremy Scott, and his architectural restorer, Mark Hadawi.
Oh, yes. Mark Hadawi is really the Lautner whisperer, isn't he?
Right, indeed. A perfect person to work on this.
It's an incredible house and an incredible testament to the power of Lautner's architecture in Palm Springs. And for those of you that haven't visited Palm Springs, tell our listeners about kind of where it's sited and what's nearby. For instance, there's another very famous Lautner house nearby.
Yeah, so Southridge Drive is this sort of rocky ridge that rises in the southern end of Palm Springs. And when you're up there and you're facing down, you really have the whole city spread out in front of you. It's quite miraculous, and it's really beautiful. As Jeremy Scott says in the documentary, it's really two houses. It's one house during the day, and it's a completely different house at night, where it's just the lights are very low. It just sort of disappears into the rocks. So after Arthur Elrod had built his house, he had done some work for Bob and Dolores Hope. They had a house down in the city, in the movie colony, but they wanted to build up at the top of Southridge. So they bought 6 lots, I believe. I think maybe they added a couple of more later. And they wanted John Lautner to design their house as well. And so every Thursday they would go for tea at Arthur Elrod's house, and they would talk about the plans. They had a model built. And Arthur Elrod's nephew remembers driving Arthur Elrod and John Lautner to meet with the Hopes in their Toluca Lake home and see the model. They were in the process of having Arthur do their house, the interiors, and you can only imagine what that might have been like, what might have been.
Adele, tell me about the documentary. When did you start working on it?
I started working on the documentary in February 2019. That's when my book was published. And it's when Arthur Elrod was being honored with a star outside the Architecture and Design Center. And I knew that it was an event that I wanted to capture. There were people in town who aren't usually here, and it was a one-off thing. And so I was introduced to Alan Kramer, the cinematographer.
Sure.
And he stepped up, and we started filming that. And then lockdown, COVID, and, documentaries take their own sweet time. So we have been working on this for 6 years. The film actually premieres the same day. So we started on February 15th, 2019. 7 years to the day is when the film will premiere on February 15th, 2026.
At Modernism Week.
At Modernism Week, yes.
And are there plans to have it on a streaming service or something like that afterwards?
So I have been doing this through Preservation Mirage, which is a nonprofit, and they're acting as my fiscal agent, which means all donations are tax deductible, just throwing that out there. Because of that, we are only allowed to show it in film festivals for the first 12 months.
Okay.
And then after that, it can be streamed. So, but I'm not thinking of that yet, but down the line, hoping it will.
Sure. So who are some of the people that you talked to in the film about Arthur Elrod?
We have the fabulous and legendary Nelda Linsk, who was not just a friend. She and her husband, Joe, were Arthur's clients famously at the Kaufman House. Every shot that you see of Slim Aaron's poolside gossip, that's Arthur Elrod's handiwork in the background. All of the outdoor furnishings, he didn't design the furnishings, but all of the upholstery, all of the photos that you can see of the interiors, that's when he decorated the Kaufman House. Then they sold it and moved around the corner or a couple of blocks away, and he did that house for them. And they also had an art gallery, Galerie du Journal, and he did that for them too. So that was very cool. Charles Hollis Jones, Mr. Lucite.
Okay.
Worked with him a lot, worked with Arthur Elrod a lot. A lot of people who worked for Arthur Elrod in the 60s and 70s are on camera. And Jeremy Scott. We wrapped up filming at the Elrod House this June, and it was just really a memorable shoot. Jeremy is just fantastic. And he and Mark have really sort of breathed life into that house again. I'm just so happy.
Well, that is remarkable. Adele, thank you so much for talking with me about the film. I can't wait to see it, and best of luck to you at the premiere.
Thank you, George. It's been a pleasure as always. I will say one last thing is that somehow miraculously in the mid-60s, Arthur Elrod's bio changed and he dropped all pretense of being from the South. And his bio said that he was born in Atlanta, Georgia. So there you go.
Okay. Well, that's still South, right?
Yeah, but not that far south. Thank you.
That was George's conversation with Adele Cygelman. And now, a little jazz from returning musical guest Lenore Raphael. Here, she's accompanied by Chris Hodgkins on Sweet Lorraine.
Thanks for listening. U.S. Modernist Radio is underwritten by the Brent R. Harris Charitable Trust, restorer of Richard Neutra's Kaufman Desert House in Palm Springs and 6 other houses in California. And by Diane Bald and the Budman family, restoring significant architecture in Toronto, Los Angeles, Malibu, and Palm Springs. Okay, Mr. Guild?
Visit usmodernist.org's massive archives to listen to past shows, discover documentation of 25,000 significant modernist houses, and access 5 million pages of classic 20th century architecture magazines. U.S. Modernist Radio is produced by Soundtracks Recording Studios in Raleigh, North Carolina. Our theme song is performed by George Smart and Robinson Earl, with guest research by Bobby Morris. Got a guest to suggest for the show? Write her at bobby@usmodernist.org. U.S. Modernist Radio is a production of Modernist Archive Incorporated, a nonprofit educational archive for the documentation, preservation, and promotion of modernist residential design. I'm Tom Guild. George and I'll be back soon with another edition of U.S. Modernist Radio.